Why, hello everybody. Um, so middle of a heat wave right now. Unfortunately, I'm not able to just let my kids free roam outside and play. So they're in the living room right now playing Ninja Turtle games. Um, if you don't know what Ninja Turtles are, consider yourself blessed. Worst worst comic book? No, not really. It's pretty rad. They're playing the Cowabunga collection. Pretty fun game. Pretty fun collection. Should probably buy it. Anyways, today we're just gonna be talking about how much I despise Apple users. Well, not all the Apple users, but like 90% of them. Ever since the Garden of Eden, humanity and Apple has been a bad combination. Um, so yeah, me personally, um, I still use a flip phone. Um, That's so there's two kind of pretentious people. The pretentious people that are hipsters and think that people who use Androids are my kids are screaming are broke, or the hipsters that use old technology, like kind of going into a coffee shop using a typewriter. Just yeah, those kind of hipsters. So there's either the Apple hipsters or there is the I'm pretentious and I use old technology type of hipsters. I am the latter. Um, I used to have a smartphone. I actually had a BlackBerry. That was my second cell phone I ever had because it was like 2010. Um, After my flip phone broke, I went to the phone store. Blackberries were all the rage, and I did actually like my BlackBerry because it actually had a keyboard on it where you could type things out, and yeah, it was easy to use, and uh, yeah, I didn't have to worry about being distracted by everything like that. I didn't have data on it, but uh, well, I it's weird. They would let me use data for Facebook and whatever. Anyways, I'm going off topic. Um, the first time I ever had an Apple product, I had an iPod. iPods are actually pretty decent. That's like the only good Apple product. And an iPod and maybe an iPad. Everything else is just overpriced junk, except for maybe like the Apple computers from the 90s. Um, iPods were pretty good because they were cheap, well, cheap-ish. Um, they could store a lot of music back in the day compared to like my first MP3 player was an iPod Shuffle, 512 megabytes. Could fit like 10 hours worth of music compared to like the 32 megabyte MP3 players that were on the market that were like half the cost but twice as awful. Um, and I still prefer using an MP3 player over using my phone because again, I have a flip phone. Um, that's most of my experience from using an iPod. Um, uh, that's pretty much the only good reason to have an Apple product is to have an iPod. Um, the reason I hate it so much is just way too expensive. Like, I spent $100 on my phone, um, but if just looking up the iPhone prices would just want to give me a stroke. If I'm completely honest, um, the Apple products are like the Volkswagen of of the phone world. Overpriced trash and way too expensive to fix. Um, Except at least Volkswagens are a little bit better made because Germans don't really mess around with that kind of stuff. So yeah, a price for an iPhone, and at least in Canadian dollars, like $1,500 for a phone. And I'll be honest, every single Mac user, Apple user that I know is they've mostly been terrible with money. So I know more poor people with iPhones than I know poor people with Android phones. Um, it's just the way that uh, broke boys, as you call it, work. They don't know how to budget their money, so they think that they need to go out and buy an iPhone. Um, yeah, it's like $1,500 for like a high end iPhone. $1,700 for Mac computer, which, to be fair, there are some programs on a Mac computer, like if you're making uh like if you're involved in like video editing or music production, that is like the one good reason to use Apple products. Other than that, if you're spending $1,700 on an iMac, that's like the low end PC. Um, the high end PC is like an $8,000 rig, and you can't even play all your Steam games on it. So yeah, $2,000 for a MacBook Pro. I don't know why you would buy that. The iPad Minis, they're actually cheaper than the iPad, which I don't know what. Like, I don't understand the logic behind that. If you're going to be, but I mean, the thing is, an iPad Mini is cheaper than an iPhone, so maybe I don't know the logic behind it. Steve Jobs is just kind of retarded when it comes to that type of stuff. Now, um, enough about the price. The reason what made me really hate uh, Apple users, working in the call center. I already talked about that before. Had a So I would be doing web hosting, and I'd have to take calls from people whose websites would be corrupted by a virus, and they tried to upload it, so we had to suspend them. 9 times out of 10, when I get a call from somebody and I said, "Oh, your web hosting, there's a virus on the website you created, so we had to shut it down." And they're like, "Where did the virus come from?" I'm like, "Well, it came from your computer. You downloaded something naughty and you uploaded it." They're like, "Well, that's not true. Apple computers don't get viruses." So that's one thing that the Apple Store would say to these these retards, these dum dums. Uh, they'd be like, "Oh, Apple computers, they don't need any type of protection." Um, yeah, what was that? I had one call from a guy. We had to do some mild troubleshooting on his end, and he talked to me about his trackpad. You know, the thing on your laptop that every laptop has had since 1998. He said, "Oh yeah, there's something wrong with my trackpad when I try to use it." And he was like, "Oh, but you guys are using Windows computers. You don't know what a trackpad is." I'm like, "My dude, he thinks that Apple invented the trackpad." And then, of course, back in the days when I would go on Facebook, which has been a long time, you'd have the dum-dums that would argue over Android versus iPhone every single day. There's one guy, his name is Jerry. He had like a super hard on for Steve Jobs. He worked with some company that did some sort of contracting for Apple at one point. I don't know relating to what, if he was like involved in the shipping of Apple computers back in the day or if he was involved in some sort of business. But at one point he had a meeting with Steve Jobs, and that was like it's like his claim to fame is that he had a meeting with Steve Jobs once, which basically means Steve Jobs came to a conference and he was in the audience. And that's about, he clung onto that for life. Now, I knew another guy. I actually know this Jerry guy. He had such a hard on for Apple that he would call everybody stupid who didn't like Apple computers. There was a laptop that Apple put out that had the headphone jack in the back of the computer as opposed to the front of the computer. So imagine trying to reach your headphones, plug it into the back of the computer, stretch it out to the front. Someone said, "This is a poorly designed thing," and he would go on and ridicule anyone saying, "You obviously know nothing about ergonomic design," or something like that. So he was just kind of a real dick. And then when Steve Jobs died, this guy was basically in mourning for like an entire month. Yeah, and like I said, the only people that I found worse than Apple users were Volkswagen buyers. Like, you know, the type of guys that would go around and do a photo shoot for their 1998 Volkswagen Jetta that was lowered down to the ground, that couldn't even go on a dirt road. I know one guy, he's a cool guy, but he, we'll call him J-Dog. He had spent all of his money on Apple product. I mean, this was when he was like 20 years old, so he was young and stupid. Every paycheck would go towards an Apple product. He had every single Apple product that was available at the time. I don't know. Every year he would buy the new iPhone. There's like 16 now, so it checks out. The iPhone came out when I was in high school, 2008-ish, and that's right around the time he started working. But he also spent a lot of money on Volkswagens. He bought a Jetta, a GTI. He once went like a whole year and a half without checking his oil, and it blew out. So he just started a GoFundMe for his Volkswagen. So he's not he's probably fine now. He's a good guy, but his common sense when it comes to spending money was not very good, but neither is anyone else that buys an Apple product. Anyway, he started a GoFundMe to get people to pay for his engine that he blew out. This guy was also kind of in mourning when Steve Jobs died, but I don't know, it's just kind of seemed a little cultish the way people would obsess over Steve Jobs. You don't really see people foaming at the mouth over Bill Gates. In fact, it's kind of the opposite now. It's like, oh, Bill Gates engineered the COVID vaccine to make all the kids autistic or something like that. But yeah, like I said, the only people I know that bought Apple products on the regular were people who are terrible with money. Yeah, it's kind of like thing is, you don't see a lot of people obsessing over Windows computers that much, or whatever you call it. I don't know if Windows even made computers, to be honest. I know nothing. The only type of loyalty that I see that much is like people who cry and whine about video game consoles, whichever game is on which one. You get like your Xbox fans and your PlayStation fans and the 5 Nintendo fans that still exist today. Yeah, and there was also a product that came out like 5 years ago. That was a fart, ladies and gentlemen. Cost $900 Canadian for a set of wheels that you would put on the bottom of your computer. So, which is almost more than the wheels on my car. So, in conclusion, if you buy Apple products, you're a dick.